Welcome to episode 131 of the Forward from 50 podcast, where we interview people over 50 who are pursuing new direction for their lives. It's an opportunity for men and women to tell their stories, their way, and in their own words. I'm Greg Gerber, the founder of Forward from 50, and your host for today's show. On today's episode, we explore the power of storytelling with Daniel Rg Crandall, a lifelong creator who launched a publishing business with his daughter, Katriel. Daniel believes stories, especially those shared later in life, carry deep value for the storyteller and future generations of people who read or listen to those stories. In our conversation, Daniel described how listening to his grandparents helped shape his appreciation for their legacy. After sharing one story with his mother, who had never heard it before, Daniel's eyes were open to how telling stories can lead to healing, clarity, and connection even after a person has died. In our interview, Daniel explained why stories come alive through conversation rather than written questionnaires, how storytelling helps heal generational trauma, how he and his daughter guide people to uncover meaningful life experiences, and why even a single story is worth preserving. Whether you believe your life is ordinary or extraordinary, Daniel offers a compelling reason to share it. Your story matters, and someone in your life will be grateful you took the time to tell it. To tell us more about what gives his life more meaning and purpose after turning 50, please welcome storyteller Daniel Rg Crandall to the show. Thanks for joining me today, Daniel. I really appreciate the time. Tell me, what prompted you to get into the business of telling people stories?
Yeah, I super appreciate being invited to join you again, Greg. And we've had a few conversations just about what you do. And I'm 50. I'm about to turn 52. So I'm right in your target market here. But I feel like it's been all my life I've connected with story and as a way to teach and make points. So I do a lot of training and teaching. But I had the benefit of growing up with 4 living grandparents and hearing all of their story. I know not everyone gets that. It was
That's
one of the
right.
And yeah, and like I used to spend some of my summers with my grandfather for a week or two at a time. I would just hang out with him and do everything and hear his stories. And to this day, I find myself using those as teaching tools for self-teaching, for teaching other people when I teach and train. And one of the most valuable moments, though, and I haven't shared this with you before, but one of the most valuable moments for me was when I was relating one of my grandfather's stories to my mom. Now, this is my mom's dad. And I never heard that before. And I started unraveling stories that I had heard from my grandfather from all these weeks I spent with him. And it turns out a lot of it, my own mother had never heard from her father.
Wow.
Making a long story short, he was sharing things, feelings, memories, thoughts with this young man. I was 12 years old, maybe. He was sharing things with me as if I were a son. It had taken him a lot of years of healing. And I think me being able to listen to his stories helped him process through things in a way that just he had never done in his life before. And so those stories became precious, not just to me, but to my mom and then to my uncle and other people. And all of a sudden, the burden of my grandfather's stories, when he passed, I was the carrier, the sole carrier of these stories that he was willing to share. And so I have a lot of other stories about gathering stories, but that was an impactful moment that I look back on, and I wish I had listened more closely. I wish I had written down and recorded and asked him to share more. It was just in a friendly environment. It was all wonderful. There was a lot, but I know there was more. And it's now gone. He's passed away. He was very old when he died. He was 90, I think 93 or something like that, which is a good old age. That's a long way to tell just one of the experiences that really led me into understanding the value and impact and healing that goes along with story.
I had a similar experience with my grandmother on my mom's side. I had the opportunity to record her telling her story many years ago, just about the time digital recorders came onto the market. And when I released some of that and shared that with her own kids, they had not heard those stories. And you're absolutely right. These stories connect us, especially generation to generation.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. My mother felt like a lot of it shed light on her ability to heal and forgive and like to relate to her own dad even after he had died. Like it actually improved her relationship in her mind with him based on what he had gone through. And yeah, so much value in that. And I think that's there was trauma in his life and there was trauma in my mother's youth growing up in the sense of my grandfather's first son was killed right outside of their house by a car going too fast down the road. So instantly and so that there were 3 other children in the family, but that was an overriding story in my mother's childhood and growing up. So I was able to reframe a lot of that and the experiences my grandfather went through. Anyway, so being that third-party storyteller and being a creative guy all my life, I started in publishing 25 years ago doing textbooks. Textbooks are not very interesting, but textbooks are complicated. And so I had to wrap my brain around all of the thousands of pieces of art in a math pre-algebra textbook and the accuracy and the need for design and all that. And it really gave me an immersion into publishing in books and the creative space. And that was my first foray into designing books. So that love for story and the skill set of designing and creating books makes your path obvious sometimes.
I understand you wanted to be a creator as early as 12. And what caused you to wait so long to actually jump into this?
Yeah, I started my own publishing company when did we start it? 2023, at the end of 2022, but with my daughter. And so this is jumping way forward into recent times because my daughter was interested in publishing. But my creative skills and my design skills, I really started recognizing those at about 12 years old. And again, this is the time I was hanging out with my grandfather. At 12 years old is a pretty significant time for boys, especially young men, to learn about yourself and to discover things about yourself. And through my relationship with my grandfather and all that. But I remember distinctly being aware that I saw the world differently than people around me. And I was creative. I was an artist. My dad was an engineer. My mom was on the creative side. So I had both of these pulls going on. But it was at 12 that I said to somebody, someday I'm going to start a school for people that don't, or that struggle to learn, or what I said was people that learn differently like me. And what I was voicing was not that I struggled to learn, because I actually didn't at all struggle to learn. I struggled to see things the way everyone else saw them, because I saw things in a unique creative lens. And so that understanding started to hit me at 12 years old. And I think that has carried through when I listen to people's stories and when I relate back what I'm hearing from them. They're like, yes, you get me. And so that ability to carry that forward in a creative way has really been a huge gift.
I always find it fascinating when I hear people say, I felt this calling or this tugging on my heart early on as a teenager or early 20s, and I pursued another direction because it was more practical. And then they came back to it when they were over 50. And it's just, once that gets in your heart and into your spirit, it never goes away. That's what you were created to do.
And part of that came out of yet another story. My grandmother was, and I tell people she was Little Orphan Annie. If you have a picture in your mind from the cartoons of Little Orphan Annie was, my grandmother was a little curly, redheaded, precocious, big buck teeth lady that my grandfather fell in love with, which is funny because my grandfather's real quiet. So she was very out there. You know how that goes together.
Opposites attract.
I know. But hearing her story as an orphan and the fact that she was, well, okay, little orphan Annie again, she was dropped off at the door of an orphanage. She was left in a basket on the step of an orphanage. This was probably during Depression times. Actually, this is even before that. This was turn of the century, but by a family that she was told by a Canadian family. That was it. That was her whole story.
Little orphan Annie, not your grandmother.
No, my grandmother.
Oh, your grandmother.
This is actually when I say she was little orphan Annie.
Okay.
This was my grandmother's story. She was dropped off in a basket at an orphanage by a Canadian couple. And so she was an orphan, plays into my desire to work with orphans and adopted children. And we, as a family, we took in kids from foster care and adopted a child through that. So all that to carry the continuity of the story, like that was a huge influence on me. Just knowing that she actually lacked story and she felt that emptiness and would talk about it. Fortunately, she could talk about it, which was good, but she was abused. She went through being despised in the orphanage, being told she would never be adopted or any, like, when I watch that movie, I feel my grandmother's story in that. But it was in the later years when she started to learn a little bit about herself. And then at some point I went over to Ireland and I met an old lady who looked exactly like my grandmother. And I said, "You're my grandmother. Like you are my grandmother." She was deceased already at this point. When I said, "Tell me your story, because whoever you are, my grandmother comes from your city, comes from your village, and she might even be your." So I sat at this old lady's feet and she told me all about the place in Ireland where my grandmother probably came from. And she said, "Everyone there looks like me." So like all of a sudden I had this story to my grandmother, who unfortunately she didn't get to hear that part, but I have this connection with where my grandmother's family came from at some point back in Ireland. Anyway,
it's really neat that when people tell their stories like that, it does provide the connection and puts all kinds of things into context. You don't realize it when you're growing up as a kid, why mom and dad act the way they did and why they might have hurt you through their own actions. And then when you hear their stories and you realize what they went through themselves, it shines a whole new light on the experience, which again is why it's so important for seasoned citizens to share their stories.
Yeah, totally. And I was going to say, I have a younger client right now who went through a whole lot of trauma in her life. I can't even tell the story because we're working on the book now, but she's actually a public figure and she reveals a whole lot of trauma that she went through. And she started it as an expose to tell what was happening, almost to defend herself against attacks she was still undergoing because of her public figure nature. But she didn't understand how cathartic it was, how much it would help her unpack, unveil, understand, and reframe and put context to her life in just writing that story down. It's not even published yet, but just in the process of capturing that, going through the editorial process. Yeah. So what we do, my daughter and I, my daughter works in the publishing industry with me, and she started at 16 because she had the creative skills and was curious about this. But what we do is we actually do interviews where we can build people's story through interviews and ask them questions. People love to share, but it's meaningful to look somebody in the eye and listen to their story and ask them questions and get clarity and ask them about the significance, or even share empathetically in that story. Then that often creates the framework, but then we set up a series of kind of follow-up interviews once we work with someone to draw out that tale, where we then listen again or ask questions. You told me about this, and investigate and get deeper and and deeper into the significant parts of someone's life, or simply they share things that they hadn't shared before. And a lot of that, you build a relationship with somebody who's telling their story to you. You start to really feel what they felt. And it helps us write and create and draw out the meaningful aspects of that for them to share with their family and everybody.
I love that, because there are organizations or companies out there who are telling people stories, and they're doing it by emailing questions to individuals and having the individuals write out their story themselves and mail it back. And it sometimes lacks context, and it lacks clarity, because there isn't an opportunity to follow up. And what do you mean by that? Explain that further. Go into some additional details. And the story is really in the details.
The story is in the details, and it's in the human connection.
Correct.
So, as you and I are chatting, like, I share the story of my grandmother. If I just narrated this to no audience, it would probably fall flat. It's really hard to emotionally capture that. And maybe actors can do it. They learned how to deliver content like that. But normal people are not built to screw up their courage and tell a story in an emotional way on a video with nobody there. It just doesn't apply. And email is even less personal. And I like that those systems are gathering people's stories. And I work with a writer out of Maine who, she has a lot of connections, and she's elderly herself. Her husband was a publisher and he died. And so she connected with me to help her with that part of her business, do the part that her husband was doing. And so I partnered with her. But she has a lot of people's stories. They start those email programs with the kids, send it to them, and they start that. But it's boring. They don't enjoy doing it, or they refuse to, or they just don't engage it. And the kids are like, come on, we want your story. So eventually they give in and they connect with her. And she does the same thing. I didn't even know this, but she does the same thing we do. She sits down with people. She'll even fly and spend a few days with people in a nursing home. If their memory is going, she'll spend like several days there. Wow. Capturing moments when they're lucid, or just being present with them and capturing bits and pieces of story. She does it in a more extreme way, but there are people that care. Like she and I are funny because we'll get on a call talking together. We get all excited about how passionate we are to listen to somebody share their life with us before that is gone.
It's funny that you mentioned that, because a lot of kids buy their parents these programs to tell their story. And for them, it's too much work. They just don't want to do that. They don't want to type it out, and they don't know what's going on. But if you sit down and actually ask them questions, many people are more than happy to tell their stories. They love the spotlight. They love that somebody's interested in them enough to look them in the eye and ask follow-up questions.
And they need that. Mm-hmm. We opened with that, the fact that it's healing, but they've shown there are so many studies that show, especially as you get older, you get more lonely, and lacking human connection leads to health issues, leads to problems. So yeah, there's so much value, true value in valuing people. And I think that gives my daughter and I both just a very different perspective on why we're doing this. It's not about just publishing books, because I don't care if the book ever becomes a public book. A lot of these books get printed 25 copies because they just go to the family. But that family has the story, and it's there. And if they ever want to do something more with that, it can be done. So that's exciting.
What is it about just telling a story that is so therapeutic to people?
Yeah. You get into psychology, and I'm not a therapist. I'm not a psychologist. I'm what I call a loving human being. That's more precious than either of the other two. Like, loving human beings are needed more than therapists and psychologists. In my opinion, I think that holds true. But like sharing sharing your story, you go through pathways of feeling again. Like you actually re-feel what you felt. But a flower dies and the odor goes away, the image goes away. Eventually the presence of the flower goes away. But when spring comes and you see the same flower again, before you touch it or smell it, you have a memory of how it made you feel. And I guess that's my analogy. And that was a story I just told right there, right? That helps you frame something in your mind that it helps you put things in perspective, deal with them. It helps you feel again when maybe you're not experiencing things in the big way you used to. Maybe life was big and grand and now it's not anymore. Now there's a struggle. Now it's counting pills in the morning. Or everyone has a struggle like that. Maybe you're just retired and bored. Maybe it's golfing every day. Maybe you have plenty of money to do anything you want, but you don't want to do anything anymore. Everyone has just such a different struggle.
I would imagine that telling the stories is just a process of cleansing your mind from the trauma that took place. But more importantly, that it's validating to have somebody listen to it and assure you that what happened to you mattered.
That it mattered, that it's okay, that you're not abnormal, and perhaps that's something my daughter and I maybe do just in enjoying people's company that way, where there are people that want you to commiserate with their story and feel miserable with them. And I find that I don't allow myself to do that. In that space, because I'm crafting a story that is going to encourage and educate and help people in the future. And if it helps this person right now, that is also part of the purpose. But my ultimate goal is to pass this story along and find the gems, what did you learn in that? How did that change the way you did this? How did that affect X, Y, and Z in your life? What would you have done differently? Knowing now, what's the lesson you got from that? I know that was horrible. What's the lesson? And so I think not only is that valuable to the story, but that is helping a person who's lived those experiences to see that there's a greater purpose in what they experienced. Telling their story helps someone else learn and grow, whether it's to avoid or make a decision or just to reframe their own trauma, whatever the case may be. It can be anything, but then all of a sudden that trauma becomes bigger than you. It's no longer just about you. And it's now about, okay, people experience hard things. What did I do to overcome? I didn't kill myself. I'm still here. How did I overcome? How did I manage to still raise a family and be alive and be there for my grandchildren and still to this day tell the story?
I know.
So, yeah.
I know that generational trauma can be really hard on families because what happens in great-grandfather is passed down to grandfather, passed down to your own father kind of thing. And simply telling the story might be a way to put an end to it by saying that this is the impact, this is what I experienced, and you might as well, but here's what you can do to overcome it.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that wholeheartedly. I have my own stories. I think when we met before, I talked about how I have a couple of significant stories of my own that I haven't yet published. I've worked in bits, in journals, in different ways to tell those stories and to write and capture them, but I need to publish those as well. And I recognize that. That's part of what I'm heading toward in this year.
What's the name of your company?
So Alisona.com is where we connect with people to publish family histories and memoirs. And it's just Allison A.
What's the meaning behind it?
Yeah, Alisona there's a story behind that name, right? Arizona is a small area just south of where I live in Tennessee. So if you look it up on the map, you'll find me. But Alisona.com, Alisona, in that area, I met older man and his wife who live in a log cabin in Alisona, lived in a log cabin in Alisona. And this gentleman kept telling me how much story he had, and we connected, and I listened to some of those. I really wanted to pursue capturing more of his story and telling that and sharing it with the world. He was very connected in the music industry, kept saying he wanted to share some of these things. And it was maybe 3-4 months ago that I actually sent him a text message, and his wife called me back and said he had passed.
Oh,
And yeah. And so I had that website and domain name because it's a local area that I wanted to tell stories about, but it changed into a cautionary tale of, yeah, you're not going to capture everybody's stories, but this man really had a lot to tell and share, and just his life was very busy. And so he didn't have a bad life, but I regret I wasn't able to carve out the time and find time to sit with him and listen more, record his stories, and get some of those connections and tell that. So a lot of that goes with him. It reminds me, and there are areas like all over the country like this. And we live in a historic farmhouse just north of that Alisona area. But this man knew people that lived in our house. He grew up and played with the kids that lived in our house, 70 years ago.
wow.
Like, he was telling me stories even about my own house. Now, that's crazy. And so maybe I don't even remember exactly how we connected, but that's one of the ways, just we had things in common.
Sounds like something out of the movie Home that was released last year, where they
I haven't seen that.
It was about one couple's home and how it who lived in it over the course of several centuries, and everybody
Okay.
had their own story. It was neat. Yes.
I like.
You started this business with your daughter. That's a neat project. Why did she get involved in this?
But yeah, so we homeschool our children, and we've got 5 children, 2 of whom have graduated already. My daughter's the second. And part of what we do is we want to make sure our children have successful skills. Like, this is high school, and you're teaching your children how to become adults, finish high school, finish well. So senior year, we work with our kids to make sure that they have a business of some sort. They have, whether it not just a marketable skill, although that's a first part of it, but they have the ability to go somewhere and make money. Whether that's, I don't care if you want to start a lawn mowing business. My senior coming up right now is 17 years old, and he's making money through soccer. I'm like, I don't care if you want to play soccer, you're going to have a formula for making money with soccer. And so he's created a website, and he's developing. So my point is, my daughter, 16 years old, was interested in publishing, and she knew I had published books years ago, and I had moved into corporate marketing and all that stuff. And when she started pressing me on it, she said, I think I want to start a publishing company. She just said this offhanded. I said, how about doing that for your senior year? You can start and run a publishing company. You do everything that requires. And I guarantee you that meets all of the requirements for high school senior year, because there's math in there, there's finance, there's communication, there's creativity, there's everything in that. There's science, there's engineering, there's a little bit of everything, but it's a very practical way to spend your senior year in high school. Yeah. So we did that. We started that publishing company, and I challenged her to publish. We needed some goals and some targets. I challenged her to publish a book a week, and she did. So she did 50 books over a year. I said that met the requirement. We'll allow you 2 weeks vacation. And please call that. And yeah, so over the course of a year, she published a book a week, met that standard, designed some incredibly beautiful works, and then published some basic just like public domain works, because she had her mind set and her eye set on the goal.
Mm-hmm.
She was working on this big project that was going to take 2 months. She had to get a book out this week. So she would find a public domain work and publish that, or something can be published their book. So yeah, so that kind of, once she did that, I said, okay, now the next part of the plan is you can own the company yourself, or we can manage this together if you want my expertise. She opted for us to stay together and work on this together. So myself in a publishing company, publishing people's books and connecting with a ton of people over this. So it's taken a life of its own, which I love.
So are you more involved in interviewing people and capturing their stories, or in designing the books that you guys produce?
Before I started this publishing company, I run a training company. So I teach creative skills. I teach entrepreneurs and a lot of people in their second career. I teach them how to do the creative part of their business with technology, whether that's marketing, connecting with an audience, email lists, all those things, designing things. And a lot of those people were in the speaking world, and so they had books to publish. And so there's kind of a tight marriage in there. I do a lot of teaching and training and coaching. I tend to get the clients, and my daughter does the interviewing and writing. But we work together. A lot of people that come to us have already written a lot of their book. Because we're an established publishing company, we get a lot of people who come to us that already have an outline in a journal or in some form. And so we're starting from that. But we're getting more and more, we're just starting to get more and more people who have nothing, in which case we have to do this interview process of starting from the ground up and just capturing your story. So I don't know if that made sense. That process seemed a little elusive. We publish books. We help people publish their own books. And whenever possible, we want to write and capture other people's stories. If someone we're even throwing around the ideas of people come to us and they only have a short story that they want to tell. I'm going to get 12 people together and publish a book of 12 people's short story.
That's fun.
So if that's the only story you want to tell, if it's just a short story, not your life story, let's tell that story too. So that's the next project we've been looking at, is how do we just value that, even the small stories that matter to people.
If somebody wanted to tell their own life story, what aspects of those stories do you think people would find most valuable? Do they need to know every place that they lived growing up and all the schools they attended and their favorite colors and favorite TV shows and things like that? Or are there things that are more important?
Yeah, that's a funny question, because a lot of those questions are in the developmental email story.
Okay.
But not ours. We're asking people, I do want to know a little bit of the timeline of their story, their life timeline, when and where they were. But we use those as launching off points so that when they're telling us a story about Arizona later on, I know that fits in the time when they lived in Arizona. And then I can ask more pointed questions. Now, you moved to Arizona in 1949. Was this right after you moved, or was this before you left? When was this? Or would you go back and visit? That helps us frame story like that. But my part, and a significant part of what I do in the business, is editorially read through and look for ways that story is impactful and try to draw those out. It started as just that needs to be its own chapter or chapter title. But then once we have a chapter and chapter title, now we want to explore that topic and the impact of that. And so that's when we can go back with another interview or just a couple clarifying questions sometimes that can open Pandora's box maybe. But it's amazing how, being from the outside, like usually I'm a stranger to these people, and when I see those and recognize those valuable story points, oftentimes they didn't pick up on that. And so they find like fresh value. Like they're like, oh, I didn't realize that happened. Oh, I didn't make that connection. Oh, I didn't realize how important that was. I didn't know that nobody else experienced life this way. I didn't know that, you know what I mean? They have all these things that are in their mind, just part of a plain story. But when I bring the wow factor to that, all of a sudden they're like, oh, my story is more significant than I thought.
Exactly. I think a lot of people believe that they don't have anything that people would be interested in reading. And yet everybody's story has an aspect in it that is just fascinating.
All four of my grandparents, every single one of them, had amazing story and interesting life. When I look back and I think through what that story was, I'm like, it's the same as a lot of other people I've talked to. But when I talk to them, and when I talked to them in the past, they're all deceased now, but when I talked with them, it was impactful, it was unique. Like it is unique because they experienced it, because I'm their grandchild, because this is our family, because Prevanic Road in Connecticut is named after my great grandmother. Like stuff like that. It's a little thing, but it's wow, there's a road in Connecticut. It's got our name on it, and it was my grandmother's farm.
Have you faced any challenges when doing your business?
I have a lady I'm working with right now in New York City, and she's not interested in publishing her memoir, but she had a bunch of children's books that she had written, and she tried to publish them twice, and she's spent almost $50,000 with people. Yeah, I know. And it makes me sick to tell the story of like how horrible that was. So she connected with me because she wanted to publish it herself. And she's got MS. She shakes like crazy. She can barely hear. She doesn't see very well. So we meet on Zoom, and she has to like lean way in, and she has what I'm saying is actually transcribed on the screen. Like when I say you ask for difficulties, like this is one of my hard cases. And not only that, but she's insistent on the illustrations in the book and stuff like that. I'll be honest, she's not the easiest person to work with either, because she's struggling. She was taken advantage of. I had to come up with and I didn't have to. I chose to offer her a way to get her book published that is fail-safe. First of all, I asked her children to be looped into the emails so that they would know that I wasn't trying to take her money again. But we came up with a way that she can give just a very small amount of her paycheck, which her kids control her money, which is smart at this point. They need to. But they approved a small amount of her weekly pay, and I have a kind of a time aside when I'm working on her book, and I share the progress with her, and she's paying after the fact so that she's seeing the progress. Like, it's weird. It's this weird trust-based relationship where I had to come up with something, and I said, and it's a story about adoption too. So like, this touched my heart. I was mad that somebody took advantage of her twice, and I'm like, okay, and it's a cute little story.
That's me.
We're gonna do this. We're gonna make this happen, and it is a personal story because it's about she adopted some children, and so it's about her experience, but she tells it in a farm animal story, and it was a unique, totally unexpected gift to me. And I had to work out a way to make this possible. But I'm like, let's find a way to make this possible. Let's just do it.
And her children will be very appreciative of that, I'm sure. Yes.
We're in the illustration phase now.
If you could turn the clock back, is there anything you'd do differently?
I think, yeah, and that's asking me about my story now. The one thing that I always find and wish I had done earlier is listening to and valuing people more all along the way. I have no regrets from listening to and valuing people. And the only things I wish I had done more was more listening and more valuing.
When grandma speak, listening because there's value in what they have to say. And you might not realize that when you're 9 or 10 years old, but there really is some wisdom in that.
It's funny because I was one of those precocious youth that would talk way too much. And I was a but why child, which is embarrassing to say. But why? But why? But how? But why? It meant I was a curious child.
Right.
And I think these are way back childhood memories, but I think my grandparents started telling me stories started telling me their stories because otherwise they were going to have to listen to me. And it's very possible that I benefited from being a little bit of a pest. And I appreciate, though, that none of my four grandparents ever rejected me, but instead filled my head with their stories.
What advice would you give to people over 50 who might be struggling with how to identify or pursue things that would give their life more meaning and passion?
There's always purpose in your life, and life is a gift to be valued. The fact that you have life is a gift to be valued. And there are several different coaching programs that I actually teach when I work with older people. I like Dan Miller's 48 Days to the Work You Love is one of the things I'm trained and coached in, but there's a convergence of things that you've done and things that you love. And if you just talk to somebody about the thing that you love to do and the skills that you have and look at where they touch and overlap, there's always something you love to do. There's always a skill that you have. And if you look at where they overlap, everybody needs that from you. That's so super valuable, the convergence of those two things. And that's the simplest way I can phrase it. But I've studied that convergence a lot because I have the struggle of having a lot of skills. That's not a complaint. I can't complain. I can't justify complaining that. My dad was an engineer, and I grew up with a whole lot of understanding and skills of different technologies and things to do and whatever. And it took me a long time to temper down all of the skill sets and say, wait a minute, where's the convergence? Where's the other line of my own, just what I enjoy, what I'm passionate about, what interests me? And when I landed back on that, all the skills fell into alignment. The purpose, the schedule, the time fell into alignment with when those two things converged, because it gives you a focal point. A line doesn't give you a focal point, but where two lines converge, that gives you a focal point, and you can move toward that. So
that's great advice. We teach that everybody has natural talents, learned skills, and unique life experiences, which they can draw upon to teach and help other people. And so that's very similar to what you were saying.
Yep. Yeah. It can be teaching it. It can be, absolutely. I think we're in a place where we have this bizarre education culture where there are tons of online training and education programs and stuff like that. But a lot of times they're tapping into young people to teach technical concepts. I'm like, let's tap into people that have been around the block once or twice to teach us real life skills.
Exactly. That's right.
I'm just over 50. I always connect with the older people in my church, and I'm like, I run things for the sound of wisdom. I was like, please, don't leave. I want some of that wisdom before you leave. Yeah. I love that. You're doing that.
How can people connect with you if they would like to learn more about the services that you provide or just ask you a question?
Yeah, alisona.com is an easy way to connect with me. My name is Daniel Rg Crandall. And if you type that, it's on the screen here. If you type, you're going to find me. I have a lot of different places I post and exist. I connect with people on LinkedIn, though, as far as social media. But alisona.com has a form that if somebody is interested in a book project, they can just fill it out and we'll reach out to them. But then there's a phone number there too. Okay. Call. Feel free.
Are you active on any other social media besides LinkedIn?
Not much.
Okay.
All of our businesses have a presence on every social media, but the same contact information is on Facebook. Yeah, you can find me on Facebook. You can find me on LinkedIn. That's where I like to be. Alignable is actually a place where I connect with people professionally.
Okay.
And then I don't want to go down the list of websites.
That's all right.
Just two websites. You don't want to.
Absolutely.
A lot of those are author web pages and stuff, but just my name. I would love to connect with people. Use that phone number, text or call.
Very good. Thank you so much, Daniel, for sharing your story today. It's inspiring. I hope more people listen and start sharing their stories and capturing them so that their people who follow them, their friends and their family, can benefit from their wisdom.
Absolutely. Yeah. I love that's what you're promoting in a big way. Yeah. Anything I can do to help you tell that story to people, let me know.
After turning 50, Daniel Rg Crandall found deeper purpose in helping people preserve their personal stories. That desire led him to create a publishing company called Alisona with his daughter Katriel. She started working in the business at 16, producing beautifully designed books and collaborating with clients to bring their memories to life. Now an adult, she helps her father capture and preserve people's life stories. What makes their work unique is the way they capture stories through real-time interviews. Instead of sending generic questionnaires, they meet with clients face-to-face or online. These conversations help uncover stories that often surprise even the storytellers themselves. The process not only preserves memories, but also brings healing and understanding in ways that writing alone can rarely achieve. Daniel and his daughter work with people who want to publish books for their families, not necessarily the world. Some projects produce only a few copies. However, others begin with a single short story that become the seed for something even more. Either way, their mission is the same, to help people capture the meaning behind their experiences and ensure those stories are not lost. Daniel said that if he could do anything differently, he would have listened more. He values people deeply and wishes he had taken time to hear their stories while they were still alive. That realization now fuels everything he does. To learn more or to connect with Daniel, visit www.alisona.com. You can also find him on Facebook or LinkedIn. He welcomes conversations with people who are ready to share their stories, whether it is long or short or still in the making. That's all for this week's show. If you'd like to start living a more meaningful life, I encourage you to download our free guide to finding purpose, which is available at www.forwardfrom50.com. I'll have another inspirational interview on the next episode of the Forward from 50 podcast. Thanks for listening. If you like the show, please consider leaving a review wherever you download the episodes.